You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Well, it was better than his fight against Big Show.
Okay, but seriously.
I said on the show last week, I thought the fight would go 5. To get 10 rounds, more than happy with both fighters' performances here. And, some people on Twitter were not goading Mayweather after the fight, but saying, how about going, 50-0 against a real boxer? But I don't think Mayweather has anything to really prove. He's, as Todd said, of this era, one of the greatest boxers. And Conor can go back to UFC, and I don't know who he fights next, but I really don't know if he's going to fight anytime this year. He could just lick his chops and come back next in 2018 and be well rested and defend a title or do whatever. I mean, Conor McGregor is going to be very hard to deal with now that he made so many millions in the bank. So,
Well, that is actually a perfect transition to what I wanted to ask Todd about next. The looming Conor McGregor decision, as he put it in his headline on SureDog, because now they've got the man who made $100 million in one night to deal with, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think it's conceivable that Conor McGregor doesn't try to change the economics of the UFC at some point in the near future, but I think it's unlikely. I mean, I think that Conor McGregor is going to, whether it's for the next fight or the fight after that, going to go to the UFC and say, look, we need to create a new type of arrangement. Not, you're going to pay me a higher amount per buy, not you're going to give me a little bit higher of a guarantee, but we're going to change the arrangement we're doing here. You know, we're going to think of this more as partners. You're either going to need to give me a gigantic guarantee, or you're going to need to give me a straight cut out of the overall gross, as opposed to just, a certain amount per buys, or work out some sort of other arrangement. But I think Conor's going to be saying, look, I made this much money from this boxing fight. I should be making the same sort of thing in MMA. And at that point, UFC is going to have to decide either, are we going to do that? Are we going to change the nature of what we pay, at least this one guy, relative to everybody else we've ever paid? Or are we going to say no, play hardball, and I think essentially force Conor's hand to look towards promoting himself down the line. Now, the advantage UFC has in the situation is that they've still got him under contract for a number of fights. So they can sort of hold that over his head to try to get him to take a deal that's more in line with deals that have been made in the past. But, I mean, I think Conor's going to be looking at the situation, and he's got to be thinking, if I'm promoting the whole thing like Oscar De La Hoya did when he, left Top Rank, or like Floyd Mayweather ended up doing when he left as well, that's gonna be a completely different economics than what he's getting under MMA. And frankly, Conor can command a different economics, and the different economics make sense for Conor McGregor in a way that it doesn't for pretty much any other fighter. Somebody even like at a John Jones level, the idea of John Jones going out and promoting his own pay-per-views is a perilous proposition on a number of levels, from his level of star power to the support that he'd need as far as other fighters that he would need to fight against, as well as being able to have some sort of an undercard to make people interested in it. There's a bunch of question marks there. Conor McGregor, not as much. Conor McGregor signs a few key fighters, promotes himself as the big attraction on pay-per-view. It's going to do very well, and he doesn't need to pay nearly as many people, and he can make a much larger cut of what's coming in. So he knows that. He's a smart guy. And the incentives for him to leave the UFC are much greater than pretty much anyone in the past.
So, for UFC fights, if he does stay in the fold and they do find interesting fights and he's willing to take them, should we have the expectation now of paying $75 or $100 for a fight with Conor McGregor in UFC?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but that strikes me as a pretty strong likelihood that they'll raise the prices for the Conor fights. Yeah, I think there's a real good chance of that.
And Peter, would you be willing to pay those kind of prices?
Probably not. I'd be shocked to find out how many people would try to pirate those streams.
Well, I think we already have the evidence of that from the number of reports of pirated streams we got this weekend. I know of one person who personally told me he was watching an Instagram account that had 60,000 viewers that was live streaming the fight. Now, I know they can't have been happy to find out that many people were bootlegging it, but at $100 price point, I don't think they can be surprised either.
No.
Yeah, the bigger it gets and the more it costs, the more people are either gonna find something illegal or go to a bar or they're gonna get a friend to order it and everybody chips in. It's the economics of it are gonna become increasingly difficult for people to pay, so the buy rate is still even gonna be in question. I think people had already concluded before this fight began that it wasn't gonna top Pacquiao and Floyd, but Todd, do you agree with that?
With that it wasn't going to top Pacquiao and Floyd, or what specifically?
Yeah, that it wouldn't, in terms of dollars of pay-per-view buys, wouldn't top that.
I was very open to the idea that it would top Pacquiao and Floyd. I didn't view it as some sort of certainty. I still don't, because we don't know what the numbers are, but I would not be surprised if it did better than Pacquiao and Mayweather. I also would not be surprised if it did worse than Pacquiao and Mayweather.
Okay.
Now, I don't think they did the closed circuit for Pacquiao and Floyd, though, across the United States.
I don't remember if they did closed circuit for that or not. I have no memory.
I don't think that would count toward the pay-per-view buys, but I think more people would be inclined to buy it on pay-per-view as opposed to going to the movie theater and spending X amount instead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do know that a lot of the bars in my immediate area were so concerned about not having enough capacity for the people who wanted to see it that they actually sold tickets in advance. If you wanted to have a seat in the bar to watch it, you had to buy a ticket.
Wow. That's like playoff hockey here, where if it's during the summer months there, they just have like a big screen TV outdoors and they extend the patio.
Well, they could have done that here, but I don't know that anybody tried, or at least I didn't hear. But I do want to go to John Jones because Todd did mention that it was a difficult proposition if you had John Jones promoting himself compared to Conor. Well, he may not even have to worry about that for at least the next 4 years, eh, Todd?
Yeah, although, I mean, given the amount of time, I mean, he may be one of these guys looking to fight overseas. We'll see if he gets that long of a suspension.
Do you think he'd be able to fight again in the United States if he did that? Would he even get sanctioned by anybody here after going overseas to basically get around being suspended?
I mean, it's a little bit of a different situation just because, it's so high profile, but I mean, there have been other guys that have either done that or looked to do that and haven't seen a ton of blowback when they look to get sanctioned back in the States again. So, I don't know. Given how much money he brings in, I tend to think that there would probably be somebody that would look the other way.
You know, that does raise a point that I heard brought up during the whole build-up to the Money Mayweather fight on Saturday night with Conor McGregor, is that the rules get bent when money is on the line. And I don't mean Money Mayweather, I just mean the sheer amount of money that comes with a big fight. Because we've seen in the past that they've actually delayed sentencing Floyd Mayweather and sending him to prison and so that he can get in a boxing pay-per-view and Nevada can make a huge windfall from the amount of bets generated and the amount of pay-per-view buys and the amount of tourism and people that come into town for one of his boxing pay-per-views. So do you feel that there is a conflict of interest when it comes to fighters who have the potential to draw big money like Conor Floyd or maybe even John Jones, when it comes to how they're punished for their violations of the rules?
I don't know if conflict of interest is a term for it, but certainly those commissions are looking at the situation differently based on the amount of money they bring in. I mean, there are double standards and triple standards depending on who it is. But I mean, that's just, that's just the world. I'm going to tell you like Wu told Wyclef told me, cash rules everything around me.
It certainly does, but I think there are people who are looking at it side-eyed going, yeah, they shouldn't even be allowed to rule on the sport then if they can make favorable rulings toward people who make them more money.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly would hope that that there would be sort of a fundamental adherence to principles over looking into the sort of the financial situation, but I think that's a little bit more hopeful than realistic.
Right. It would be naive to assume they don't have double and triple standards, as you said. So, Peter, I'll throw it to you on that one. What do you think the future is then with John Jones on how he's treated by the commission? Do you think he's a big enough draw to pull any weight, or do you think they'll throw the book at him?
They'll throw the book on and make an example of him. I think what they're going to do is they're going to force Jones into sort of like a coaching role, something where he doesn't have to be tested by the commission or get licensed by a commission. He can open a gym and, coach fighters, the next generation of fighters, to be the next champion in the UFC, or hell, take a long vacation because you ain't fighting in the UFC for the next 4 years.
That also leaves the question of what you do with the light heavyweight division if John Jones isn't around for the next 4 years.